The kingdom of God will be given to a people that will produce its fruit. So what does that mean? What does this image of fruit mean? What is the fruit that the kingdom produces? In the parables, we hear that it is grapes, for the purpose of, usually grapes in Jesus' culture were used for wine, but they were oftentimes eaten as well. So what is fruit? Or maybe we should ask the question, what is the fruit that we're supposed to be producing? Because all too often, I worry that the fruit that we think we're supposed to be producing is an abundance of personal holiness. That the whole endeavor of the kingdom of God is individualistic. So often we hear preachers and speakers and writers talking about the role of the kingdom of God as if the whole summit, the whole point of being a Christian is for me to get holy, and that's it. That's not the point of the fruit. Don't misunderstand me. Personal holiness is part of what we're supposed to be doing. It is part of it. So don't think that I'm saying, oh, it's okay, you don't have to be holy. No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is personal holiness, that personal life of virtue, is not the highest priority. What is the highest priority of bearing fruit? Well, what does fruit do? Fruit feeds the hungry and quenches the thirst of those who are thirsty. That's what fruit does. And what I want to ask you to consider is that this is no empty metaphor. This isn't just a nice sentimental idea. That at the very heart of what fruit is, the very heart of the two parables of vineyards, gives us an indication of what it is that God expects of us as the new tenants in his vineyard. Whether it's all the way to the beginning in Genesis chapter 12 when God called Abraham and he said to Abraham, I want you to bless the world. My world is broken and I need someone in your descendants to bless it, to care for it. Or fast forward to Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the Last Judgment, when Jesus says to us, what you did to the least of my brothers and sisters, you did to me. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give a shelter to those who are homeless, visit the imprisoned, welcome the stranger. We call them immigrants today. Over and over, the point of bearing fruit in our world is to care for the deepest hungers and thirsts of the hungry, the weak, the vulnerable, the needy. Our job in bearing fruit is to go outside these walls and to actively care for those who are hungering and thirsting for justice. If there are poor in our midst, we must feed them with fruit of the kingdom of God. If there are homeless in our midst, we must give them shelter because that's what it is to bear fruit in the kingdom of God. If there are people who cry out because they are oppressed and suffer injustice, we must redress the injustice, call it out, challenge it, and insist that they be treated with the dignity that their status deserves. This is what it is to bear fruit. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Francis, and I want you to reflect on what happened in Francis's life. Here he was from a wealthy family, the life of the party, the most popular young man in the town of Assisi, the guy who all the ladies wanted to spend time with, and the guy who all the other men wanted to imitate. And when he had this profound encounter with Jesus, and Jesus appeared to him in the form of the San Damiano Cross. That's what's on my chasuble, and that's what we have behind us. This is why we Franciscans love this cross, because it was from this cross that Jesus said to Francis, go and rebuild my church. And as soon as Francis understood what this meant, he's a little dense, a little slow. It took him some time. It took him a couple of months. His life changed. He spent the rest of his life rebuilding the church, not by talking to bishops or the Pope or doing all kinds of great important seminars and starting great campaigns. No. He went to the leper colony and he washed the wounds of lepers. He looked for the poor and the hungry, any place he could find them, and he fed them. He looked for division and conflict, and he tried to bring peace. He understood that the fruit of the kingdom of God was to do the works of feeding the hungers of this world and the thirsts of the vulnerable. Whatever people cry out in hunger, whatever people cry out in thirst for something good, he understood that his role of building up the church was to go and to provide for them. Whether it was the injustice of the Crusades, Francis walked. Could you imagine walking from Italy to Egypt? But he did, Italy to Jerusalem. He did. He walked there. Why? Because he went to the Christians and he said, this war is not God's will. I want peace. They wouldn't listen. He said, fine, you won't listen to me? I'll go preach to the Muslims. He crossed the battle line and he went to the Sultan of Egypt, and he spent 3 days with the Sultan preaching peace. He tried. It didn't work, but he tried. He confronted all of the injustices in this world by doing something about it, not talking about it. He confronted all of the hungers of this world by providing fruit to fill the bellies and quench the thirst of those in need. He lived like those in need. My brothers and sisters, personal holiness is important. Please don't misunderstand me. But if we're going to understand what these parables are about, we must understand that it's actually not the highest priority of being a Christian. The highest priority of being a Christian is that our faith, the faith that God is judging us on, whether or not he takes this vineyard from us, is whether or not we bear the fruit that feeds the hunger and quenches the thirst for all those who cry out for justice in our world.